brothers and sisters across Africa, and friends around the world. Welcome back to Africa Speaks. Before we get started, please take a moment to like this video so it can reach more people. Your support helps keep Africa's voice strong, independent, and heard by millions. Now, let us picture a scene in the heart of one of Europe's most powerful nations. Inside the French Parliament, a bright digital board flashes two numbers: 194 in favor, 364 against. In that single moment, the numbers tell a story that ends a government. A prime minister who had promised tough reforms is forced to resign. A president suddenly scrambles to find a replacement. The same country that once redrew borders across Africa cannot even secure its own budget at home. And this collapse is not just France's problem, it signals a wider shift in global power, where old narratives are fading and Africa is stepping into a stronger role with new confidence. On September 8, 2025, the French National Assembly voted on a motion of confidence in Prime Minister François Bayrou and his plan to slash public spending by 44 billion euros. The plan was meant to reduce a ballooning budget deficit and calm fears about France's rising debt. But opposition came not only from the left and right, but even from parts of the political center. When the final vote was announced, 364 against, 194 in favor, the defeat was crushing. Bayrou immediately resigned, his austerity gamble collapsing in a single afternoon. Global media outlets from Reuters to AP, France 24 to The Guardian, all carried the same headline: France's government had officially fallen. It wasn't speculation, it was fact. The very public unraveling of a government that tried to sell sacrifice without offering real hope. Within hours, President Emmanuel Macron moved quickly to appoint a new prime minister, Sébastien Lecornu, his ally and former defense minister. Yet rather than proving stability, this appointment revealed France's deep fragility. Lecornu became the fifth prime minister in less than 2 years. In any democracy, frequent leadership change can suggest renewal, but when it happens this often, it starts to look more like a machine slipping its gears. Lecornu promised to seek consensus, but his first decisions deepened divides. He refused to restore the wealth tax, a move many citizens see as key to fairness, and he stood firmly by Macron's highly unpopular pension reform. Now he faces the daunting task of drafting the 2026 budget in a parliament where his government does not even hold a majority. What France calls stability looks more like controlled chaos, especially when the numbers and public sentiment pull in different directions. To grasp why this matters beyond France, we need to zoom out. For decades, much of France's global influence didn't come from Paris alone. It came from its presence in Africa, its military bases, its defense agreements, its dominance over the CFA franc, and its cultural reach through the Francophonie. These were tools that allowed Paris to project itself as a global force. But in recent years, one by one, those pillars have crumbled, not by accident, but by deliberate choices made by African nations. In 2022, Mali ended France's military presence. In 2023, Burkina Faso followed. Later that year, Niger expelled French troops and diplomats. By 2024, Chad announced plans to wind down defense agreements. And in 2025, Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire began reshaping France's privileges on their soil. Across the Sahel, French flags that once seemed permanent came down. This was not the empire disappearing overnight. It was African countries choosing new directions for themselves. Each departing French convoy left behind more than just empty barracks. It left behind a gap in France's story about itself. And while Paris lost influence abroad, problems at home piled up. Public debt remained stuck above 110% of GDP. Deficits kept breaking European Union rules. Every new reform, whether pensions, taxes, or spending cuts, sparked protests, strikes, and unrest. Prime ministers cycled in and out of office. France was caught between its ambitions and its financial limits. Bayrou's 44 billion euros austerity package was supposed to reassure markets and European partners, but to lawmakers and citizens, it looked unfair and uninspired. They saw sacrifice without a vision. That is why the vote was not even close. It was a loud rejection. Not this way. For Africa, the irony is impossible to miss. For years, Western commentators painted African political instability as proof of immaturity, while France's endless cabinet reshuffles were framed as healthy democracy. But in September 2025, the images from Paris told a different story. Riot police on the streets, teachers and health workers on strike, trains shut down, a prime minister gone after only months. Suddenly, the metropole was facing the very storms it once described as Africa's problems. France's crisis can be summed up in 3 points. First, The numbers. The deficit remains nearly double EU limits, and cuts alone cannot solve it without hurting public services. Second, legitimacy. A government that cannot even pass a budget risks losing its authority. And third, narrative. For decades, France sold its role in Africa as proof of its global relevance. Today, with African nations carving out their own security, economic, and diplomatic paths, Paris's slogans about partnerships of equals sound more like words in search of reality. Africa is no longer waiting for France. The continent is building its own future. This collapse in Paris is not just about numbers on a voting board. It doesn't mean Africa directly caused François Bayrou's downfall, but context matters. When a country loses its external pillars of influence, it must rely on strong foundations at home. If the economy is shaky, politics divided, and citizens exhausted by endless sacrifice, the system can crumble faster than expected. That's exactly what happened in France. As its influence abroad shrank, the weaknesses inside became impossible to ignore. Without external strength to lean on, every domestic problem looked heavier and harder to manage. Meanwhile, Africa has been reshaping its own destiny. In Bamako, Ouagadougou, and Niamey, leaders, whether praised or criticized, have embraced one principle above all: sovereignty. That means choosing security partners freely, deciding on economic rules independently, and setting national goals without foreign permission. Some countries have welcomed Russia for defense cooperation, while others built ties with the Gulf, Turkey, India, and China through infrastructure and trade. Regional frameworks like the Alliance of Sahel States prove that African nations are learning to pool resources and coordinate policies on their own terms. The road ahead will not be smooth. Risks and mistakes are inevitable. But the crucial point is this: the handwriting is African, the authors are African, and the direction is African. Back in Paris, Sébastien Lecornu faces a steep challenge. He refuses to restore the wealth tax, wants to cut the deficit to about 4.7% by 2026, and must negotiate a budget with no reliable majority in parliament. He says he will consult widely, but numbers leave little room for talk. Citizens will not accept painful cuts unless they see a fair strategy for growth, investment, and hope. Even France's own press reflects uncertainty, describing the atmosphere as one of waiting and holding breath. Lecornu is taking his time, but the calendar is against him. Another budget battle looms, and if he loses it, Paris may witness yet another government collapse, spinning the revolving door of prime ministers once again. France is not alone in facing these struggles. Many European nations are trying to sustain generous social systems while dealing with aging populations, slower economic growth, and harsher global competition. What made France unique for decades was its ability to point to Africa as proof of continued global importance. That image is fading. Analysts now describe France not as a global empire, but as a mid-level European power. This isn't an insult, it's a reality check. Power today is spread across many centers, shaped by networks of ideas, partnerships, and results. Africa is no longer a shadow in that network. It is now a center of gravity in its own right. So what lessons should Africa draw from Paris's crisis? First, not to gloat. Instead, we must focus. The decline of another's influence is not the same as the rise of our own. To turn opportunity into reality, Africa must keep doing the hard work of nation building. Courts must enforce contracts fairly. Customs must move goods quickly instead of stalling them with corruption. Audit offices must act with teeth, not just bark. Procurement should favor local industries, creating long-term jobs. Budgets must prioritize power stations, classrooms, hospitals, roads, and broadband, the foundations that allow private enterprise to thrive. Security forces must protect citizens, not exploit them. Every step in this direction reduces the space for colonial narratives and enlarges the space for Africa's future. Money is another critical front. As long as African currencies and central banks remain exposed to sudden shocks, our economies will stay vulnerable to the same harsh arithmetic that just humbled Paris. If the CFA franc is to be reformed or replaced, it must be done carefully, with strong regional institutions, financial buffers, and practical transition plans. Regional development banks should stop drowning projects in paperwork and instead pool resources to deliver infrastructure quickly. Roads must be built before the rainy season, not after endless conferences. Culture is also power. France once leaned on Francophonie to project soft influence, but today, Africa's cultural exports speak for themselves. Dar es Salaam's films spark global trends. Bamako's music echoes across continents. Abidjan's dance styles pulse in European clubs. Nollywood dominates streaming platforms. Songs from Luanda and Maputo travel further than any embassy report. Africa doesn't need permission to tell its stories. We need strong platforms, legal protection for artists, and the courage to keep creating authentically. Will France recover? Possibly, but only if it abandons nostalgia for empire and accepts reality. France still has strong institutions, world-class universities, talented engineers, and an industrial base. Its future strength depends on honest accounting and realistic ambitions, not illusions of past grandeur. French voters are not naive. They are willing to sacrifice if they believe in the goal. Bayrou failed because he demanded cuts without hope. Le Cornu claims he will balance both, but it will be Parliament, the streets, and the markets that decide if he can succeed. For Africa, this is a rare moment. We are no longer reacting to Paris. Paris is reacting to us. The real question is not which global power we should follow, but how we can make all powers compete to offer us the best terms, while keeping control of our own direction. That requires discipline at home, paying civil servants on time to remove excuses for corruption, publishing contracts so citizens can see deals made in their name, and training young people with the skills that match Africa's growth: electricians for new grids, machinists for new factories, coders for tech platforms, agronomists for modern farms. These steps turn options into leverage, and leverage into results. The confidence vote in Paris did not end France, but it ended the illusion that old scripts still work. It was not just a rejection of one leader, but of a narrative out of step with the times. Historians will remember the headlines: Bayrou out, government falls, Le Cornu in. But they will also note what was happening across Africa at the same time. New refineries opening, new trade corridors linking economies, debates on currency reform and financial independence, and security partnerships forged without France's approval. The balance of power has been shifting for years. Paris is only now waking up to how much has changed. Yes, a government has fallen in the same country that once drew borders across Africa. But our story is not about their fall, it is about our rise. And that rise is not measured by speeches, but by factories producing, farms feeding, ports clearing shipments on time, courts delivering fair rulings, teachers staying in classrooms because salaries are paid, engineers returning because contracts are clean, and artists creating freely. That is sovereignty in practice. It does not need Paris's blessing. It needs our patience and courage. If you found this analysis valuable, please like this video so YouTube can share it with more people. And don't forget to subscribe to Africa Speaks for more fact-based reporting in our own words. Let us know in the comments. What lessons should African leaders take from France's crisis? Will Europe face more instability in the years ahead? And how should Africa prepare? Your thoughts guide our next deep dive. Thank you for watching and stay connected.